Welcome back to Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher. With me today, with me always, is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thank you for joining me today, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. Folks, what we're talking about today is attitude. Everyone has had the experience of being on a team or a work environment, and this one person who just is the Debbie Downer, right? Like, is just the negative Nancy, and it just makes the entire situation hard, right? Often a hard situation even harder. That can derail the entire experience for everyone. When I was in younger jobs, working with people in construction, for example, and that's hard labor as it is, right? It's a hard on your body, it's hard on just the day, right? You're exhausted by day's end, and then when you have someone complaining the entire time, like, even if I was in a good mood to start the day, it's like by the end of the day of 8, 9, 10 hours of complaining, I'm over it, like, at that point. And oftentimes as a rebuttal, like, everyone is, kind of, like, lightly bullying that person because 'cause they're just sick of it as well, It's just like, "Shut up," like, "Just shut up, dude," you know? And it's hard, y'all, and often that poor attitude is derived from the things that we talk about, right? Where it's like a lack of self-love, a lot of fear, right, for just the world in general, a lot of fear in themselves. And what I also want to mention too, before I throw things over to Adam, is that um, a mind shift that I had in my brain, and I mentioned this in previous episodes, was just like, what if things could be great? Like when I was spent worrying about outcomes or situations, and to flip it, instead of worrying about the worst possible things that could happen, I was just like, what if it's gonna be great? Like what if it could be amazing? And then oftentimes like it was, and also too, something that I've really done well was like if I put so much pressure on a situation or an outcome, like I want things to go well. It's like that creates some sort of anxiety as well. Where if I just let that go without any expectations of the outcome, things often end up, working out pretty well. It was just like, oh my God, like that was a great day. Like I didn't put any pressure on it. I didn't put any, expectations of like this has to go well. When I let go of the outcomes, it often exceeded my expectations. And yeah, Adam. So like, opening thoughts on attitude, right? As derived from, fear, lack of self-love, all those things we talk about. And yeah, man. Any experiences with that in your personal life? What's going on with that with attitude, brother?
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, same thing for me in the past, being surrounded by negative people, or even when I was the negative person in the room. The
Yeah, it's
experience
it's been us too, right? Like
runs.
we're not saying like it hasn't been
Yeah,
us. Like it has been me
yeah,
at
yeah,
times as well. Like it's like we're guilty of
yeah,
this as well. But just to, in the pursuit of growth, right?
yeah.
We're acknowledging it.
Trying to get back in shape.
Back in
Um,
shape, brother.
yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I related before, also working in construction or working in the fire department, specifically, and yeah, that job, being on shift with like 10 guys, and there could be, just one person could derail the entire day. And that was observed many times, and it was an important learning moment to observe it both externally and internally. When it's like maybe I'm being the negative one today. Maybe I'm bringing my personal life into work or whatever. If things aren't going so well. So always a good thing to look at. But I found like the best way of dealing with it always was just finding humor. Like you said, if that person on the job site ends up getting like lightly bullied or something like that, if it can be done in not in a bullying way, but in like a more positive way, like bringing just some light to everything that's said, I always found that to be a really positive way of dealing with it. Just to throw in a couple actionable ideas or steps, because I think that's in every workplace for the most part. Everybody's got an experience with that, and like you said, it's coming from a place of like a lack mindset, a lack of love, and so we want to replace that with more love, not more fear, not more hate by, you know, hating on that person who's behaving that way. It's important to, yeah, if we feel the need to vent some of that energy by making fun, then just doing it in a light and positive way because yeah, we don't want to contribute to the problem and just have it keep recurring. So yeah, I think it's uh it's an important thing to think about because we all experience that. But yeah, it was pretty funny at times at my old job because sometimes it was like so extreme that you kind of just had to laugh at it. It was hard to take it seriously because somebody could come in with such a dark cloud over their head. Like I was mentioning before, we hopped on earlier in my, career there were there were some guys there were 4 guys that were known as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they were so negative and toxic, and it
Yeah.
was like, you know, so there you go right there, like, that in just in that little anecdote, there's an example of somebody making light of it and, like, having a laugh about it because that's the you know, that was pretty
Yeah.
funny in my opinion. So, yeah, just, you know, just always and that was a really great job for that specifically because and, you know, I think we talked about dark humor a long time ago, but there were many instances where, um, you know, humor was injected into, you know, maybe you're already having a negative day and then something really, really, like, most people would agree objectively dark happens, you know, working in emergency services and then having to inject humor into that. It was very funny and very powerful. But, a great examination of polarity, for me personally being in that experience, seeing going from light to dark and back and forth, many times throughout the day. So, yeah, it's an important thing to think about, uh, where it's coming from, how to deal with it, because, yeah, in most cases, I think it is, a lack of self-love, as with most things.
Yeah,
But yeah.
absolutely, you know? And if you don't laugh, you'll cry sort of thing as well,
Mhm.
you know, when it comes to, again, just like an attitude shift, right? Just how dealing with hard things. And we mentioned in previous episodes before, like, you know, some of the most traumatized populations are some of the funniest, right? And, you
Yeah.
know, there's beauty to reshape struggle into something funny,
Yeah.
you know, just that there's a power in that, a dignity to retain dignity despite hard situations, you know, and still to be able to
Yeah,
laugh.
totally.
I've talked to, I've had the privilege to, you know, speak to a lot of people in, hiring situations, right? Whether, you know, they're owners of a company or, you know, what have you.
Mm,
And this theme rings true for a lot of them where they say, you know, you can teach anybody a skill, right? You can teach someone how to fight fires. You cannot teach them their mental framework, their attitude, right? You know, and so it's people, and I, you know, in my experience as a musician, right? You know, when I'm working with people, it's like I will take the better attitude, the better friend, the better hang than the more talented asshole. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because it's like you're spending so much time with these people and it's hard work, right? Like you're lugging gear in, you know, it's long days and like you're playing sets or 3 hour sets and then you're lugging gear back down and it's all for, you know, too little money, you know, and so it's like it's for the love of it, right? And if someone just has a shitty attitude despite all of that, it's like, brother, you're making a hard thing even harder, you know, and or sister. It makes it worse. Like it does not help, you know, when someone brings that mentality into the mindset of or that mindset into a situation and life is already so hard, y'all. Like everyone knows that. Like life is a hard thing. It's a hard thing to move forward through life with grace and dignity. And I'm not saying this is easy, right? Like this work is easier said than done. And like I said, and like we've said, Adam and I have been guilty of poor attitudes in the past, and everyone has an off day, right? Everyone has an off day. We just hope that the majority of your days have a, you know, a more sunny disposition than, you know, just the than the opposite of that. And so and you can train that too, right? You know, like we've mentioned when people say things like mind over matter, like it's really true. Like your brain is programmable. We've talked about all the ancient mystics and the ancient teachers, right? And what people have been talking about, these amazing people throughout human history, what they've been talking about as well. And it's that, you can create your reality from your perspective, right? So when we talk about self-love, and that's been an ongoing process for me as well. When I try to reprogram my brain in the morning, and yeah, it's the best time to do it, right? The start of your day is
Mhm.
often in the morning, or what I found, and just positive affirmations, right? Like, positive things that I try to tell myself, where before, I was, oh, like, you're dumb or you're stupid, or what, why would anyone care? Just like, again, the negative mindset about myself. And would I treat a friend or a family member like that, or someone that I cared about like that? Like, absolutely not. So why am I doing it with myself, right? And so I had to shift that mindset of treating myself like I would a friend or a family member or a brother, and really, yeah, reprogram my brain. And by doing that with positive things and the positive affirmations, like, I am worthy of love, I am enough, like all those things that you hear online and you hear in, social media. But um, fake it till you feel it, right? People say fake it till you make it, but it's like fake it till you actually feel it, even if you don't. And that's been really a cool process to notice that, number one, I'm not my thoughts, right? If a crazy
Yeah.
thought comes in as well, and then to fight the crazy thoughts, or the unloving thoughts with love, with loving thoughts, and just be like, and to shift that perspective has been fun, man. It has been a fun journey, and interesting to be like, okay, like, wow, like, you have so much more power over your mind than you think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like a friend of mine put it, instead of fake it till you make it, was be it until you see it. And I was like, man, I like that because we're not really faking anything. But yeah, it's important to observe those thoughts, and just through the observation of them, you create the awareness that there is that perspective, that there is like subject and object. So therefore, you're not your thoughts. And when we start to look at the negative loops that are, we can say the root is like this lack of self love, which is really fear. Uh, when we look at it closely enough, the fear dissolves because it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny because it it ultimately crumbles as it's seen for the illusion that it is. Because um, it's like taking things so negatively. Someone coming to work with a toxic attitude. It's like, what are they really saying? They're essentially saying, like, life has been unfair to me. Something bad has happened to me. I feel like a victim, right? Something bad has happened. But when we understand that everything is karmic, everything that's happening is happening in a cause and effect relationship, then we understand that we are the architects of our reality. We do create it, as you were saying. So really, it's like, if you really peel back the layers, if we're being negative, if we're being toxic, if we're stuck in these loops, which essentially means holding on to something from the past that we thought didn't go right? I mean, it kind of breaks down to that. Um, then it's kind of like inherently narcissistic, because we are still seeing ourselves as separate from the whole process. Something bad has happened to me, it went wrong. I'm judging it as having been wrong. But really, I was a part to play in that, and whatever's unfolding is part of this whole karmic process for me personally and collectively for everyone. So when we look at it more closely, as I'm saying, it falls apart, and there's nothing, and we realize there's nothing to fear. And that's where that mindset shift that you're talking about then can come in and really have a good foundation underneath it, because we can see that, like, yeah, everything that's happened up to this point has been our creation. And therefore, moving forward, I understand that it's also like our creation. So now let's just do it consciously rather than unconsciously. Thinking that we're not the architect of it, thinking that we are victims. Like, look at how that's been working. Again, be a keen observer of life. Look at how that's been working, and for ourselves or collectively, look at the state of the planet, and make a different choice, right? Because that's what it comes down to. Make a different choice, and start to understand that we are at cause in everything that's happening. So start to cause start to be at cause in a responsible and conscious way.
I just finished the book Unbroken, which they made a movie out of it. There was Louis
Oh,
Zamperini. He was like an Olympic runner. Angelina Jolie made a movie, right, of the same book. Um, and so I read the book, and my God, man, this guy went through hell, right? He crash landed in the Pacific. 10
okay,
guys
Japanese.
on a yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Japanese theater of the war, the Pacific theater. And he spent like a month plus at sea with three guys at first. One of them died in the raft, and so there was just two left. And then he was in a Japanese prison POW camp for the rest of the war. And because he was an Olympic athlete, like there was this one guard that like had it out for him and would like beat him every day and like really try to like take away his dignity, like break him because he was like, a shining example of American excellence was this,
Mm,
Olympic runner. And so, the war got over and he had it, he was drinking, self-destructive behaviors, like, really, really toxic. And then he had because he was letting the guard still have power over him, right? Like the trauma of the war. Not that I mean, this man had every reason to have trauma, like he went through hell.
yeah.
The indomitable human spirit, though, right? He bounced back, right, and he really tried to come from a place of love and forgive that guy. Like try not to have. They called him the bird, the guard, because he was just a terror for everybody.
Mm,
And And again, it's just like because I was watching this, while not watching, I was reading the shift in attitude from the different parts of his life, and it was amazing, man. It was amazing, and just then how he had every reason to become bitter, but did not,
yeah.
and he was bitter for a couple years after the war. Like, he was really in the depths of his trauma, and but then found love again, right, and did so
Mhm,
through religion, right, like kind of like a born again Christian situation, but
yeah.
whatever gets you through the door, right? Like if that's a beautiful tool, and again, we say that jokingly, right? No hate, like Christian love, but I know there's beautiful examples of Christians out there actually trying to do the work and love thy neighbor and,
Yeah,
and do unto others as they would do unto themselves, right?
yeah.
And
Actual
so he was a good,
Christians.
yeah, actual Christians. And so he
Yeah.
seemed to be a shining example of that. He ran summer camps for boys, right? Troubled youth and like really tried to, again, pour love into them as well. And so in this other chapter of his life was just a shining role model and example. And something else too that I want to note from him because it really left an impact on me. This book, man, was just and I've heard this from other people where it's just like don't let the old man in, or woman, right? As you're aging, you're getting older. It's like age is a
Mhm.
mentality, it's a mindset, and we
Yeah.
go back to like we're talking about attitude, right? And we see people, I've talked about this in past episodes as well, but as we see people age, I see two paths, right? Like they do with grace or they get really bitter and resentful at like at seeing time have passed them by. And what he did was age with grace, right? Like he was very active into his 90s, right? He learned skateboarding in his 70s, which I was just
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, like that's really cool. Right? You know what I mean? Like that's, like I want to be like you when I grow up, sort of thing. Like my fitness heroes, we've talked about this in the past, the people that impress the hell out of me. It's not the 20 guy, the young 20s guys that are bodybuilding, even though they're impressive, right? And the discipline is impressive. The people that impress the hell out of me is the decades of work that someone has spent into their body and you see them still in shape into their 70s 80s even. Those are my fitness heroes, right? And again, it's attitude, right? Like maintaining this mindset throughout the course of your life and the structure. And so yeah, man, I just finished that book, so it's top of mind, and it was big on attitude, right? Like as we're talking about attitude, and
Yeah.
I wanted to share that.
That's cool, man. Thanks for yeah, I've heard of the story before. I've never, gone in depth with it though, but it's cool because it doesn't matter what the trauma is, whether it's light or heavy, and, like, who's to judge that anyway, but, most of us would agree that, like, that guy's trauma was heavy. Consensus. It's like at the end of the day, no matter what has happened to you, it's like it's always up to us to put it down. We can carry it for as long as we want. And we have got such a like victim mentality supportive kind of paradigm here, which like has its good side, of course. But also if we're gonna go deeper into processing our stuff and actually moving through it, releasing this energy and coming to a deeper place of self realization, it can be quite a hindrance. And yeah, because that's the thing. It doesn't matter what happened. If it's in the past, like it's only alive in our minds. It's only us that's keeping it alive. And when we're doing that, we are kind of like, and I say this word narcissistic, and I know people get a little triggered by that because it's been so kind of overblown in the last few years. But again, just getting to like the like understanding of what that means. It's like believing that we're separate, believing that like what happened to us was so special and so extreme because and it had such an impact because we're this like separate being, where it's possible to be lost and forgotten by God. And like, so whatever happened to me was so bad, but really ultimately, like, we are all one, and everyone's experience is everyone's experience, right? If we're looking at it collectively. So yeah, it gets to this place of like looking at it like, how long do I want to continue the pity party? I've absolutely had to look at this extensively in myself because I was just carrying had a chip on my shoulder about, a handful of different things for the longest time, and allowed it to affect other relationships moving forward. I allowed it to drain myself and drain other people around me because, I had that bad attitude. Sometimes I was that guy at work with the bad attitude. And as we said at the start, what have we all observed in those cases? Like, it drains the energy from the room. It can ruin the day for a whole bunch of people. So we get to the point where we realize that we're the only one hanging on to that stuff, and we get to the point of realizing like it's a choice, and then we eventually get to the point of making the choice to move through the world in a different manner and put that stuff down and yeah, move more freely because it yeah, it just it doesn't serve us, right? We can look at it when we look at it from the perspective of like, whatever it is you're carrying, like, how is it serving you? And just look at like, how is being bitter about this, like, from thing from the past, how is it serving me? A lot of people would say, and I definitely used to say, well, it's like I'm keeping myself safe. I'm looking out for that sort of behavior from others in order to prevent it from happening again. But if I'm stuck in that, but that actually has like an inverse effect, because if I'm stuck in that mindset where I'm looking for negative things because I'm telling myself that I'm trying to like keep myself safe, and this is like, usually like the trauma pattern for most people, what you end up doing is just creating it again, because again, you walk down the street and you're hungry, you notice all the restaurants. And so if we're looking for negative stuff, we're going to see it. And then that's just going to reinforce that belief. And then it's going to reinforce that behavior. And then the cycle continues until the suffering gets great enough that something breaks. And we come to a greater level of awareness and see that we were responsible for all of it. And karmically speaking, like, even the stuff when we're kids, no matter how heavy it was, whatever happened, it is in the past, and it's up to us to put it down and to stop feeding it our energy, because the more we feed it our energy, the more we make it real in our experience, and we make it real in the experience of those around us. So yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. Ultimately, we all got to get there. And so someone like that who, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, the guy from the story, he
Yeah, Louis
like
Zamperini.
Louis Zamperini is a shining example, because most of us would agree that's a really extreme experience and some really heavy trauma. And for someone like that to be able to move through it and leave it behind is that means like, yeah, we can do it too. It's like, again, can look and use stories like that as a way of gaining perspective and recognize like, wow, my burden is light. Even Jesus said that, my burden is light. And he got crucified. So it's something we can all think about.
Yeah, that I mean, like you said, that's a big takeaway. It's like reading his story. It's like, man, whatever I've been through wasn't that bad, you know,
Yeah.
compared to like what this guy's been through, and and compared to what our ancestors have been through, right? With my
Yeah,
ancestors, being mainly Irish, right? It's just like, they've been through famine and a
genocide.
form of genocide, right? From
Yeah,
the British, right? If you have ancestry that's, Native American or indigenous to, Central America or, the South America, right? If you have any ancestry and they've undergone that,
yeah.
every
African.
part of the world has been African, right? A lot of people have been, both oppressor and oppressed at some point if you go back in their ancestry, right? And so it's like we've been doing it to ourselves time and time again. As
Mhm.
Adam and I, as if we're all one, we keep doing this to ourselves, and hopefully, moving forward into a different mindset where it's more rooted in love and peace and more rooted in empathy for our fellow people, for our fellow human beings and animals and all the creatures in this earth, right? Not just humans.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's like it's interesting, the way you brought that up there made me kind of remember to mention it's like it's the two sides of the coin, right? Like it can be helpful to remember that, to zoom out and get that perspective of like, wow, look at the suffering that other people have had, whether in these like whether we're examining it through these um individual instances, these case studies, or these anecdotes, like so, say like Louis Zamperini, or if we're zooming out to uh, greater, like larger examples, as you mentioned in North America, for example, we've got the indigenous, we've got the African American population, I guess slavery, going back, everything, right? There's so much where if we zoom out and we look, you even just look to your neighbor, right? Look, you don't have to look far. You can find someone who's more than likely got it quite a bit rougher than you do. And that's important. It's important to have those moments to zoom out and gain that perspective and use it in a positive way. And at the same time, we also don't want to like bypass what we've got going on. It's not just like a trauma Olympics, like, oh, that person's got it worse than me, so I'm just gonna like ignore what I've got going on. I think it's important to hold both, right? To observe and get that objective standpoint and viewpoint, I should say, and understand that, yeah, my burden is light, but at the same time, my burden is my burden and it's my burden for a reason. And even if I want to judge it as being some more like first world problems or whatever, it doesn't mean that I should bypass it and bottle it up and stuff it away and pretend it isn't there. Still got to deal with it in a healthy way. I'm not going to just say that someone else has it worse, so like I should ignore mine. I'm going to look at someone else's example and use it positively to help perhaps gain some perspective and allow me to lighten up at times, but I'm still going to process the trauma that has come my way in a healthy way and acknowledge it. Like, and this is where it's like it's important to acknowledge it. So that's like, that stage where we do have to acknowledge, okay, in a way, from one perspective, I was a victim. That didn't feel good. And it's okay that that didn't feel good. It's okay to acknowledge that I wouldn't consciously choose for that to happen. So then that can frame my perspective moving even deeper than to be able to release the deeper attachments to it, where it's like I'm not a victim. It's like the perspective changes the depending on the layer that we're looking from or that we're looking at. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. We got to always, in my opinion, always examine both sides of it. Just it's light, but it's also mind to process.
What I think I've been guilty of recently is seeing someone's hard circumstance and being like grateful that it's not me, and
Mm,
but then again, separation is an illusion, right? Because I've seen, and again in our travels, man, we see you see people with hard lives, man, whether it's poverty, rich in some
yeah,
ways, poor in others, right? Whether it's material goods or whatever the case is, or lack of food or whatever the case is, right? And I find myself being like, because it's weird, because I'm like, oh, like I'm grateful for what I have and I'm grateful for my life, but I'm like, but I'm also at the same time You're like, "Oh, like, thank God, like, that person's life isn't me," you know? And it's just like, but again, where do we go back to where there's like, there is no separation, right? It's like, what can I, how can I help again the collective of humanity with everyone? And that's, and then that goes back to giving back, right? So it's like while I am processing this trauma as well within myself, I recognize the need for me to like also give back or volunteer in some way, to the collective, right? To everyone else, because while I am grateful for my circumstances and I feel like I've done a lot of hard work to get here, and processing the internal, it's like how can I also, fix what's going on inside of myself and then bring that forth into the world as well. It's just something that I've been working on. Notice. I don't know if you resonate with that as well.
I think that when moving around the world and seeing examples of suffering that are, we would assume are greater than ours, it's also important, and this can be a tough one, but it's also important just to not judge it in any way. While we might want to quickly jump to the conclusion like, well, that person's got it way worse than me. And and in many cases we would probably collectively agree that that might be so. It's still important to not judge the journey of another, right? Like, and again, this is like it gets a little nuanced here, a little bit more subtle, because it's not about bypassing anything, but it's like being able to hold kind of both perspectives at the same time, like the human perspective as well as the soul perspective at the same time, and totally have them both operating, right? Like as you said, figuring out when you can give back, like when you can volunteer your time, when you can help someone out by like having a talk, by giving someone some direction, but then also knowing that their path is exactly how it's supposed to be at the same time. So it's not just like saying, "Oh, it's no big deal." Like that's just their soul's journey. Like, so I'm just gonna ignore and not like lend a hand. It's not that. It's like it's lending a hand, but also doing it from an unattached place. Because if we're doing it from an attached place, like I think this person uh, should have different circumstances, then ultimately we have created judgment in that space, and therefore we've got a blind spot. We've got an attachment there that's going to work itself out, because that in and of itself is creating karma there. So seeing when to like, feeling when to offer a hand out or hand up, however you want to say it, waiting to be asked in some cases, but always being available, and doing it from this place of understanding that everyone is on their perfect journey, and that what we are seeing is a karmic unfolding, and uh and to sort of ameliorate the situation, it takes a deeper perspective in order to understand, like, if we want to choose something higher for ourselves and for everyone else, it takes being unattached to it. So seeing someone else's situation, and whether it's better, whether we think it's better than ours or worse than ours, like trying to bring it back to a place of no judgment, to just see that like that's that person's running out their karma, and see the perfection in that. So whether we think it's worse, hold space for it, and offer help if possible, if asked. Or even if we think it's better, even if you see someone that has like way more money than you and way more, material things, also not judging that to be better, because we don't know what that person's going through. We don't know what sort of karma they're running off. We don't know what their personal life is like. We don't know what their past is like. It just to assume that it's better, or to assume that something's worse, is actually creating suffering within ourselves that doesn't need to be, because that assumption is being made. And again, that's why that's one of the four agreements, by Don Miguel Ruiz. Don't make assumptions. It's because we don't know. So, and to assume is to sort of, in a way, place an ownership on it, like thinking that we know what it is. It's again a little narcissistic. So, um, come to that place of moving through the world, and not attaching to any judgments, then we can kind of apply that to ourselves as well and get the most clarity on ourselves in order to move in and become the best vessel for the light, for positivity, and for helping others. Again, it always comes back to ourselves. So yeah, I just wanted to add that we see the opportunities to help, but always know, like, hold that kind of soul perspective behind the human perspective, which is like, it is all perfect, but I'm also gonna do my best to improve the situation because I see that we can make higher choices. You know what I mean? It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, and also like you said, with like the narcissism or the ego too. It's like I see people trying to help, but they're just enforcing their perspective onto people. Where it's like if you really want to provide help, it's like you should ask someone and listen to what they need, right? Where it's like if you think they need something because that's how you would help, that might be completely different from what is the actual reality of what that person might actually need. So, and because I've seen that as well. It's like someone comes in and they're trying to help, but they actually just kind of create more problems, or they add more headache to an already difficult situation. You have to listen before you offer help and ask what that person might
Exactly.
need or what that organization might need. It's, do you need another body, or am I going to come in and just make things harder, right? By injecting
Yeah.
another person into a situation.
Too many.
And so it's
Yeah.
also like, to be open to receive, and because again, some people, they want to help and, save the world and come down, and they inject their ego and their presence into a space. And it's like, actually, you're making things harder. So also just listening, right? And being open to receiving is something I've had to acknowledge within myself. And again, the judgment, right? It's like you think someone's life, they might have it hard, but they might be completely content, and vice versa. Like you think someone might have it easy, but in other ways they're fighting some sort of demons, with it internally.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we don't know, right? And so I really like that what you said, because yeah, man, I find myself yeah, making judgments, right? And that can completely not be the case, one way or the other.
Yeah, it's an important thing to remember, and like we can look to our own lives, right? Because like just for like the micro, the kind of like subjective example, and then zoom it out to the macro, and we think of like these kind of bigger examples that we've heard about. But like for the personal, it's like, have you ever had like your parents or maybe grandparents sort of judge your life and think that you're missing out on something because you're not making the same choices that they did, when it's like, no, actually, I don't want to live the same life that you do. I'm choosing differently because I'm choosing differently from a conscious place. I don't want your help. I don't want your advice because
Yeah.
it's not actually aligned with me. It's like like just living a kind of more simple, um, yeah, just a more simple and peaceful life. That I've run into that personally with like family members where they think that I'm doing something wrong because I'm not living the same type of life that I used to. And it's like I'm actually far happier than I was before. And then like the more macro example that I would think of was remember we would often have people going to volunteer, like North American or European people going to volunteer in like schools in Asia or Africa, and go to teach English somewhere, but they go for a week or two and then they just leave, and then someone else comes in, and they had this cycle where it was creating like real problems for those kids because they weren't able to like form any bonds with their teachers. These people come in and just take their photos for their social media, and holding some little kids and then take off, and it was like, okay, in those instances, as far as I've learned, there was actually much more harm being done because people, they had this idea that they thought they were doing something right and they were actually causing harm. So it's kind of the same thing, like as you said, it's so important to listen, to not assume, to not inject or project like cultural assumptions, personal assumptions onto any other person or group because we don't know. It's another good one was the after the Rwandan genocide. A lot of the Western psychologists that were brought in to try and help with the trauma afterward were like making things worse. And I read some instances where they were like having to kick these people out because they were making it worse, right? These communities had their own ways of processing trauma, but then you had these Western people coming in and thinking they knew better. And they were like, no, we had to ask these people to leave. It was doing harm. So always important to listen, again, like, the that age old advice, two ears, two eyes, one mouth. It's important to listen. So, it's advice we can take in every moment. Yeah, I think it's valuable.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Folks, if you like what you heard, please do all the things that help us out. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. You've seen other people in the world and how to help them if you want to support them. We really appreciate it. And yeah, Adam, any closing thoughts on, attitude, listening, the self love, the shift, the mindset?
Yeah, it's all within us. It's just it's so much simpler than most of us have thought for so long because it's all within us. We can make those shifts. It can seem difficult, but we can turn that mountain into a molehill whenever we want to. So yeah, just always turn it around and go back inward.
Alrighty, folks. We'll catch you next week. And thanks so much.
See ya.